Hey guys, welcome back to the Forge. Today I'll be showing you how I made this bug-like finger here for cosplay. I'm heavily inspired by a design from Sarah. I'll have her link in the description. Let's get into making this thing. Okay, so I decided I was going to make these rings just to get a test print to see how they fit on my finger. I'd recommend doing the same if you're gonna make your own. Be careful though, because I did actually get one of them stuck on my finger and ended up having to use a pair of snips to get it off. Just watch out for that. So here I am measuring the distances, just trying to make sure it's going, to fit with my knuckles. Just measuring the distances for the knuckles and playing around with that. So here I am, I was again using the calipers, just trying to measure the distances between the knuckles of the finger so it bends properly when you go and put it on. So here I am, I'm playing around with trying to figure out the size here, or not the size, sorry, the shell for this finger. I'm making the shell, just playing around with it, just figuring it out. So I'm getting to the end part here, and I realize that I probably shouldn't be going out when I'm meant to actually have this go over the back. So I'm creating the shell for the next finger now, and I'm like, okay, let's bring this over this smaller bit just to get it to work. Here I am making some little hinges parts I'm gonna have later. When you make hinges in general for 3D printing, make sure the tolerance is 0.2 or 0.3. You can see me doing that right there. I made it 0.3 personally. I find it works great, especially since the overhang is 90 degrees. 0.3 is enough wiggle room for some of the filament to drip down, but your joints still move fine. Here I am doing it to the next finger. Sorry, I mean the next joint. Just playing around with it, getting ready to go. If any of you are curious what software I'm using to actually block out and make these designs, I'm actually using Plasticity. I heavily recommend it as a Blender user, a person who started with Blender for modeling. Plasticity, I picked it up like the snap of my fingers. It was really nice, really easy. I actually really recommend it for beginners. So here I am just coming in and fine-tuning some of the things here for this back joint. Really just trying to figure out how I'm going to make this end piece work. I'm playing around with it. I'm just trying to figure out what it's going to do, what it's going to look like, and how I'm going to sculpt it later. I wasn't thinking about it at this moment, but I heavily recommend if you go and make your own, question how you're going to sculpt it later. Because that round piece ain't fun to sculpt with. Or not round piece, that really pointy end. I ended up fixing it later when I realized like, hey, this isn't good. So here I am, cutting it, making sure we have a flat plane to 3D print on. I go and test print it, and there's a few things I find I don't like. So I come back and fix it. I actually undo a lot of things. So I'm coming in here, playing around with things, realizing that it was a little too loose on my finger personally on this go around, and I'm trying to actually just make it smaller in general. I also ended up realizing that it was too short. It was basically for a thumb. That's not exactly good, so I'm coming back in, just trying to redo it, just trying to make it smaller in general. It's best to make it smaller anyway, just to cut down on filament costs. But when you're making something this small, filament costs ain't really even a matter. You're only gonna cut off like a maybe 0.5 of a gram. So here I am realizing, like, hey, I do need to make it longer. So I'm playing around with the spacing, just trying to figure out, remeasuring it. Just trying to get a remeasure of what's going on here. Where did I mess up to make this thing too short? What did I do? And this is where I ended up figuring it out. So you can see it wasn't off by that much. Well, I'd say that it was off by like 25 millimeters. Just don't be afraid to go back and rework things when you're doing your own design. You come back. Later on, I actually ended up redesigning the whole end piece. And just don't be afraid to do that if you need to. Sometimes it happens. It's a part of the process. Here I am just playing around with those tolerances and distances there for a moment for those last pieces. So here I am flattening it out, and now I'm going to bring this into Blender, except I'm going to bring this version because I accidentally forgot to record. So here in Blender, after bringing it to Plasticity, I'm going to do some cleanup to the mesh. Really all I'm doing here is selecting all the vertices and merging them by distance. That's all you need to do for something like this, and then you just mask out the areas that need, that need to stay in shape. So that's what I ended up doing. I really wanted to go for a dragon claw. That's what I was trying to make here. But I ended up, you can see later, going for more of a chitin-y look. But here I'm just like, okay, yeah, we'll make it look like some pointy up dragon scales. And it just ended up not working. If that something similar happens to you while you're designing it, or your own, or any of your designs, don't be afraid just to go with it. If it says like, hey, I'm looking like a bug, then just keep making it that way. And you can end up with something a lot cooler than you were going to make in the first place. At least that's what I've learned in my own design process here. So here I am just, masking the next joint, just trying to figure out where they need to be and playing around blocking it out. Another thing you see me doing is those pieces that are on a 90-degree angle to the plane at the bottom. I am actually moving them to 45. And the reason is, or near 45. And the reason for it is so that you don't end up needing supports. I don't want to make supports. I don't want supports on my prints, as I want to try to avoid them as much as possible. So I go in and I make sure these things are lifted up a little higher. Just that little bit of lift can really help with make it so you don't need supports on something. Here I am just playing around with it. I'm probably looking at my reference pieces. Here in the sculpting area, I look at references constantly. Heavily recommend it. You don't even need technically a reference page that you have. I heavily recommend having one though. You could just have Google open up to the side with just some like dragon references or whatever you want for whatever you're making. Having a reference is like a gold mine to help you just try to figure out how these things look. So at this point, I'm adding some more detail, and I realize that it's looking more chitinous. So I go in, and I go with that. I'm going around sculpting areas. I think I'm looking for references, getting a drink of water. But here I am sculpting this, just trying to make it look more chitinous, having to redo it a little bit almost on every single horn. Or every single little bit or bump on this. I'm just trying to play around with it and get it to where I think it looks nice. Up here where these little joints are, I was like, you know what? I want them to kind of look more like a knuckle at the end. Thought that would look kind of cool. So that's what I ended up going with. Here we are just adding some nice grooves. Now with these grooves that I'm added into this, I would be really careful because you can go down into the mask below that you've made and make it so you just don't even print anything there. And as you can see here, I've actually had to fill that area in where I dug too deep. So just watch out for that and make sure to make plenty of test prints when you need to. It can help you diagnose if that happens. Here you can see that horn I just wasn't liking, so I crushed it down. I was like, you know what? I'm not liking the way you're looking, and I can't figure you out. So I just moved it back down and made it look like more like a bump. And I decided to work on the horn in the back, which in the end ended up working. I like the way it came out. Here we are sculpting these next little bits here. And just keep making sure those nice lines are there, because I don't know why. I just thought they looked cool, so I just added them. I went with the rule of cool there. So here we are sculpting these other horns. And I keep calling them horns. I don't know. Spiky bits. And here I am just clearing the mask a little bit because I want to add some more of those nice lines. But as you can see, I dug in too deep and went through the mask there. Be careful of that. So now, last step of the process is making it flat so it could be 3D printed. So I'm just playing around with it, just trying to get it right there to cut everything to the same plane. I ended up getting it done. There was a couple problems with the boolean, but I ended up figuring it out in the end after going back and forth for like 5 minutes. Here we are with the finished product. They bend, they're articulated. I ended up deciding to print or paint them. I quite enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching the video. If you want this design or any other design I've made, they're at my Patreon, link in the description. Thank you guys for watching. See you next time.